We are live, Beena. We are live. We are
Hello,
live.
hello, and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Grain, and good morning, everyone who is going to join us live and will watch us recorded. You all are welcome to this space we have created for the Moreness-Culture. Here we
Oh,
are
yeah.
practicing and living Moreness culture according to Moreness culture, in Moreness culture, with Moreness culture. This is what we are doing. This is all our sharing is all about. Syl is an author, of course. Many books are coming, and we already have some books. And a lot of other things are also coming up. They're all in pipeline. We will have so many other things. We are using multiple platforms now, okay, other than this live every day, except Saturday. We are here. And also that you can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and also on Substack. The content you will find there is all about capital S sharing and, of course, capital M Moreness culture. It's the Nobelia-Living. This is the start. This is the very basic, raw, uh, fine structure for the Nobelia-Living. And it's a dream we have. It's a collective dream now. Okay, of course, I'm including myself into it, but this is a dream. It's created by, visualized by, imagined by Syl Sabastian. And then it was a dream before, but now it is a reality. Of course, it is on initial stage, but now it is something we are living every single day in our life, in every aspect of our life. What we are busy with nowadays, why we are coming live, because we are sharing the, the books of Carlos Castaneda about Don Juan with a very specific intent. First, we are doing the capital R reading of these books, but also that we have a very specific intent to connect with Don Juan, not just reading his books, not get
No,
fascinated by all the mediums he shared, but to create, to connect with the intent, connect with Don Juan, what
that's
he was sharing, capital S sharing at that time.
no.
And so that don't get confused with that we are just going to be like really indulge into the mediums he's sharing. But what was the intent behind that? Why
Yeah.
people at that time, of course, his lineage and Don Juan himself also was searching for something. My understanding is they were searching for moreness.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, because of that, they were using different mediums, trying and testing. This is how things works. You try different ways, different mediums, and then you found some. Then you find something that, oh yes, okay, now this is something. Yes, it clicks. But the intent was to have moreness, other than what is obvious, other than what is expected, other than what is available.
Yeah.
That's why they have that different realities, alternative realities. And the concept was really mind-blowing, of course, life world changing, that at that time it was completely mind-blowing concept to have different realities,
Yeah.
existence. Even the idea of having different reality was really wow. Okay, now, okay, yes, because we are lucky that we have all these understanding from different authors later on, but of course from Carlos, and which is coming from Don Juan and other, and of course his lineage. But now we take it a bit for granted that yes, we do understand. But at that time, it was really changing everything, because that perspective was not existing before, not in that particular way at least. Yes, Buddha and of course other people were also, some religious personalities were also sharing that there is another reality also exists, different way of understanding things. But the crux, the foundation, the real point of what they were doing was moreness. Don't get stuck or be
Exactly.
limited in what is available right there, obvious in front of you. There is
Yeah.
always more. That is the thing. Everybody, every
Exactly.
influencer,
That's the magic
I'm
of bonus. Yes.
yes, I'm just saying influencer with capital I, influencer. All the influencers from the history, very early history till now. Earnest influencers, real influencers were trying to share moreness. Their way was different. Some were using religion, some were using philosophy,
Trying to
some were using
find it and
poetry.
connect to it first. Yeah.
Yes. So it's other people, different people were using different mediums for that. Some became
Yeah.
artists and they were sharing moreness with the art. Some became philosophers and they were
Yeah.
creating philosophies. Some were writers and some were just okay, different way of like Don Juan and Buddha and different prophets. Everyone. I personally feel that capital I influencers, real time influencers, earnest influencers, basic thing was have moreness and bring moreness into their lives and of course share with
Yeah.
others. So this is what we are busy with. Thank you so much, Syl, for giving me time, and I hope that you are done with all your sharing and we can
Oh yeah.
start. We can start our reading.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Going there now, and I shall screen share. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Very cool. Ah, brilliant. Everybody on TikTok for joining us. Beena, are you able to see the TikTok yet? I know you were going to do that. I don't know if you
No,
got
I
there
no,
though.
it's still I'm very new to TikTok, so I don't know that. Okay, how it is working. I will put some effort to learn that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you just have to sign up and just, uh, friend
No,
me,
I
connect
do
to me,
have.
follow me. What?
Yes, I do have account there, but I don't know how to watch the lives there. I'm trying to search you, but it is not working. So maybe
Well,
it
if
is
you
my
go there
network.
right now and log into the live, then uh, you will see. Yeah.
Okay, we will see.
I mean, if you do that right now, then it should say live, if you're following me, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and then it will say, Syl Sabastian is live now, then you can see that right then. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Anyway, we can take care
Yes,
of
I'm
all
just
these
I'm
things.
just scrolling to where we were last. Uh, because my computer rebooted, so it lost my place. Well, any second now. We're talking about Don Juan is sharing about capital P perceiving. And we calling it capital P perceiving. For those of you familiar with Don Juan, you say, hey, but Don Juan never used this term. Right. He calls it seeing, but because that's got that visual association, which it's detrimental in the long term. Right. So I'm updating it to perceiving. Don Juan later on says that no, this is not the most ideal name for it, and just how it came about, right? Because of our visual predominance. Yeah. Of seeing. And then he explains about the allies, right? Carlos has this experience. These three people come to his car, and Don Juan tells him, no, they aren't the regular people. They are allies. Yes, they're not ordinary people. And he doesn't explain. They look like ordinary people. Yeah. And then he talks about this. I think I'm going to. Yeah, I'm going to pick it up over there, right? Um, Let me screen share. All right, here we go. Here we go. Brilliant, brilliant. Hello, everybody on TikTok. There's so many of you. I can't name you all individually. I try to click say hi there, so when I see that. All right. Would you like to read, Beena?
Please continue because I'm
Or
I'm just saying. Uh, I
oh,
am
you're trying to get your TikTok working. All right, very good,
yes.
very good. All right. They would look like ordinary people. Then how can you tell them apart from real people? Real people look like luminous eggs when you perceive them. Capital P, perceive. Look like luminous eggs. Non-people always look like people. That's what I meant when I said you cannot perceive an ally. The allies take different forms. They look like dogs, coyotes, birds, even tumbleweeds, or anything else. The only difference is that when you perceive them, they look just like what they're pretending to be. Huh, very interesting. Everything has its own way of being when you perceive. just like people look like eggs. Other things look like something else, but the allies can be seen only in the form they are portraying. That form is good enough to fool the eyes, our eyes, that is. A dog is never fooled, neither is a crow. Why would they want to fool us? I think we are all clowns. We fool ourselves. The allies just take the outward appearance of whatever is around, and then we take them for what they are not. It is not their fault that we have taught our eyes only to look at things. It is not their fault. Here is the key part. We have taught our eyes only to look at things. Yeah? It's an important point here, and to add that into
Yes.
my quote file, right, Beena?
Yes. Yes.
And this is a huge understanding to be aware of that we can do more with our perception. And Don Juan is saying eyes, but really when you hear it later on, you'll come to see that it's not just about eyes, it's about all your senses. Yeah? So we have taught ourselves to perceive primarily with our eyes, and the other senses, but that's the only way to perceive, and that's the point here, right? It's a very important point. We have taught our eyes only to look at things. I'm not clear about their function, Don Juan. What do allies do in the world? The- the- this is like asking me what we men do in the world. I really don't know. We people do in this world. We are here, that's all. And the allies are here like us. And maybe they have been here before us. What do you mean before us, Don Juan? We people have not always been here. Do you mean here in this country or here in the world? We involved ourselves in another long argument. At this point, Don Juan said that for him there was only the world, the place where he put his feet. I asked him how he knew that we had not always been in the world. Very simple, he said. We people know very little about the world. A coyote knows much more than we do. A coyote is hardly ever fooled by the world's appearance. How come we can catch them and kill them? I asked. If they are not fooled by appearance, how come they die so easily? Don Juan stared at me until I became embarrassed. We may trap or poison or shoot a coyote, he said. Any way we do it, a coyote is an easy prey for us because he's not familiar with man's machinations. This is the point. Yes, machinations. Yeah. The coyote and the crow are sensible, but they are sensible about sensible things. The machinations of man are not sensible. They don't make any sense. They're in a whole different paradigm. Yeah. So it's very hard to perceive things understandably and sensibly when it's a completely different paradigm. It just does not compute. Yeah. And that's why understanding different paradigms is so important. Not only the paradigm that you're in, because that creates a bubble, and particularly when it's a really peculiar, unvaluable, and ultimately not very useful paradigm like the superiority paradigm that's all pretense and no real value, but also to understand something like the monist paradigm and alternative, right? Very useful, so that you don't get caught like the coyotes and the crows. You need to understand both, and people too. Yeah, how many people get caught out and caught up in the machinations of BMNs? They get manipulated and abused, and etc. You have to understand how that mindset, that psychology works. Yeah. Anyway, we do it. The coyote is easy prey for us because they are not familiar with man's machinations. If the coyote survived, however, you could rest assured that we'd never catch up with them again. A good hunter knows that and never sets his trap twice in the same spot. Sets their trap twice in the same spot. Because if a coyote dies in a trap, every coyote can perceive their death, which lingers on, and thus they will avoid the trap or even the general area where it is set. We, on the other hand, never perceive death, which lingers on the spot where one of our fellow creatures have died. We may suspect it, but we never perceive it. Can a coyote perceive an ally? Certainly. How does an ally look to a coyote? I would have to be a coyote to know that. I can tell you, however, that to a crow, it looks like a pointed hat, round and wide at the bottom, ending in a long point. That's very interesting, right?
Yes.
When you think of this, right, the crow's perception of death is like a wizard's hat, right? Long and pointy with a wide brim. Isn't that interesting? I mean, a wizard is
Yes.
walking around with death on their head. At least they connected to death, right? Which makes sense. They're taking their wisdom from death. So I don't know. It may have nothing to do with anything. I find it quite fascinating. Yeah. um, some of them shine, but the majority are dull and appear to be heavy. This is the allies now, right? Sorry. It's the allies that look like that, not death. I'm wrong. Well, that makes even more sense then, because a wizard as an ally, right? That
Yes.
makes even more sense. Anyway, uh, they resemble a dripping piece of cloth. They are foreboding shapes. How do they look to you when you perceive them, Don Juan? I've told you already. They look like whatever they're pretending to be. They take any shape or size that suits them. They could be shaped like a pebble or a mountain. Do they talk or laugh or make a noise? In the company of men, they behave like men. In the company of people, they behave like people. Sorry, I'm making an effort to not read the inadvertent misogyny, to perpetuate this
Yes.
where we default to saying man or men.
Yes.
I don't care for it. It's not good. So it's a discipline. It's a discipline in my reading, and it's good practice to pay attention, right? In the company of people, they behave like people. In the company of animals, they behave like animals. Animals are usually afraid of them, however. If they are accustomed to seeing their allies, they leave them alone. We ourselves do something similar. We have scores of allies among us, but we don't bother them. Since our eyes can only look at things, we don't notice them. Do you mean that some of the people I see on the street are not really people? I asked, truly bewildered by his statements. Some of them are not, he said emphatically. Now, I make this practice. I don't perceive the energy directly, but every person I meet with, I I question whether they are what they appear to be. It's a fun practice. You never know. And I don't mean in terms of necessarily being an ally. I mean simply is the external person an actual true reflection of the entire moreness. I grew up where I could not show my moreness. I would have gotten into very severe trouble. So from age 6 on, I had a public self and a private self. My private self was never secret, but it was private. It was simply a different self that was appropriate for me, and the social self was appropriate for the social environment. And how many others might likewise have something similar? Yeah. So I want to see past the social persona. A very useful practice. You really learn to perceive people's innerness, their moreness, and that's very useful. That's very, very, very useful. Very powerful. Yeah, very, very
Yes.
powerful. Do you mean that some of the people I see in the street are not really people? I asked, truly bewildered by the statement. Some of them are not, he said emphatically. This is Don Juan and Carlos talking now, right? Just to make it clear. His statement seemed preposterous to me. Why? Huh. Based on what? Yet I could not seriously conceive of Don Juan's making such a remark purely for effect. I told him it sounded like a science fiction tale about beings from another planet. He said he did not care how it sounded, but some people in the streets were not people. Now, I have a story about this, personal experience. When I first came to America, we stayed in a hotel on the corner of Broadway and 101st Street. Anybody who knows New York will say, what on earth were you doing over there? So not a particularly good area. Well, we didn't know, and it went by price, right? We had limited budget, and that was what we could afford. All right. Yeah. Anyway, I got some more interesting story about the hotel itself, but nonetheless, so we were on a quest, we were on a mission, right? A spiritual quest. and things like that, they didn't matter. The quest is what matters. The importance, the fulfilling of your intent. This is what matters, right? Anyhow, so we needed to get to downtown New York for whatever reason. Now, 101st Street is pretty far, pretty much 100 blocks, New York blocks, which are pretty big blocks, right? But in those days, we could walk forever, and we did. So, right, we don't want to take the bus or taxi, save money, and we'll just walk. And we walked, right? So we're walking down the entire, this long length of Broadway from 101st Street, yes? And we went by homeless people sitting on the pavement, right? I mean, it's a long walk, and you're seeing a lot of them, right? And at first, I'm like, the person who was with me at the time, like, hey, did you see that? And they're like, yes. And they're like, oh, why were we whispering? Because what we had seen was, man, this was like really like wild. The person sitting there or the whatever, they didn't look like a person. They're like, wow, man, that was so truly trippy, right? Okay. And the second time, hey, again, did you see that? Yes. And the third and the fourth time, after a while, for me, I could not ignore this any longer. But I always have a deep, deep sense of honesty with myself, with everybody else too, but with myself especially. So that means I cannot take something that is different, unusual, and contort it to make it fit into my worldview simply out of convenience, yeah, and simply because it doesn't match my beliefs, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. All right. While I tell the story, let me end the screen share because my person who helps me was posting the videos and everything. They said, "Oh, we need to see more of you." So I'm doing that just for you, Michaela, just for you, just for you. I appreciate this. Anyhow, so now we're walking down, right, and I can't ignore this. That what we are seeing, I cannot honestly say there are people. I'm sorry, I just can't. Yes. So, but now, you walk past and you're polite, you don't stare at things. So after, those 4, 5, 6 times or whatever, I said, no, sorry, I'm going to stop and actually stare now and look. Yeah. And I did, and I apologized, and I said to whatever I'm looking at, I'm sorry, but I have to really look thoroughly here. I can't just glance anymore because my glance is telling me something that all my experience says no, can't be, and I'm staring. Yes, and my companion at the time also stared, and we both came to this conclusion, and we did this a couple of times after that, right? Multiple times, so that we were not, as we walked. Now this is over. They weren't like right next to each other. You walk, I don't know, a dozen or more blocks, and then another one, whatever, however long it was, right? They weren't like right on the same block or 2 or 3 blocks. Anyway, so but this was all the way down our walk. Now I feel very few people probably walk the length of Broadway. Yeah. So maybe they didn't ever see that. And if they did, maybe they didn't do what we did, or at least what I started doing there was to stop and actually look. Really, really look. Yes. Because, well, New York, you don't stare, don't make eye contact, all of this stuff, right? And also, furthermore, even if they did look and notice, most people don't want to know the awful truth. Yeah, they subvert it, they change it. Yeah? Anyhow, so I looked and I really looked, and I'm sorry, but I could not say they were people. That's it. Sorry. In all honesty, what they were, I have no idea, but I can't say they were people. That's it. Couldn't say. Now, were they allies? Maybe. Yeah, allies, but if they were allies, they were doing a very poor job of looking at people. Yeah. Or imitating people. So I don't think they were allies, at least in this context that Don Juan is talking about, right? Because they can take the shape of anything and they will look like ordinary people. Right? So maybe they were allies who didn't want to look like ordinary people because ordinary people get bothered. Yeah. But if you look at like something truly weird and alien and different, you don't get bothered. So it could be. I don't know. Whatever they were not people. Sorry. They were not people. At first I thought, are these diseased people? Maybe something like elephantitis or something like that, that was distorting their features and nowhere else to go and they end up here. I could not do that either. Yes. I mean, because those are all distortions of what we already have. And it was a very profound experience. I've got to tell you, I mean, it wasn't casually that I came by that. I wasn't given to believing things just because, well, like today, you see people on the internet, they believe stuff just because it's different, it's wild, it's exotic. And they get kind of a thrill, and it's like a status and an ego boost to, hey, I'm believing in wild stuff. I never had that. I can only believe something if there is some very, very real reason to do so. Anything else to me is just lying to myself, right? So I'm not saying this, what I'm saying casually. It's a very serious statement that I'm making, at least from my own internal point, yeah? And I have no clear visual of any of those entities. I could not retain it, even then, yeah? And I have good memory. I do remember things that were important to me, that mattered. I remember them. And I have usually got an associated visual, but this not. And that was noticeable at the time too, that I couldn't retain an image of it. I could only retain my takeaway. And this is the power of takeaways, right? I had transmuted the experience from being an experience to being something memorable. I'd made that effort. I'd converted it in my brain, not just regular memory. So what I am remembering is my conversion, not the memory itself. That's gone. Isn't that interesting, Beena? Now, again, like I say, I don't think those were seeing that were allies that I was seeing, according to Don Juan's thing, but it could have been either way. Whatever it was, I have to say, after that there are more things. And this was before Men in Black. Okay, anybody say, oh, Men in Black, that's what they talk about. The aliens are all living in New York. This was before Men in Black came out, right? So, I don't know, maybe I shared that story and some writer heard me sharing the story. Oh, okay, we'll write this into the story. I don't know. Or maybe it's just true and, they use truth. I have seen stuff in the movies that I experienced in real life. Yeah, I have seen that are not usual, not normal like this. Yeah. So, of course, when people write, they base on their experiences for the most part, yeah? Or at least it's helpful to do that when you're writing, makes it easier. Anyhow, so what do you make of that, Beena? I think you said this story before, yeah?
Yes, but if I don't know,
Yeah,
sometimes when you focus on moreness, then uh, things
yeah,
don't get easily shocking for you, and you do take like, okay, anomalies as part of your, not part of your life, but part of life.
yeah,
You shared that story about the two giant crows, and then of course you shared other stories also,
yeah,
and that was like, for me, it was not even a single thought that, oh, this could be not be real. No, because we know that there is more than what we are perceiving, so why not?
yeah. This
This
was when we
acceptance
were
and
leaving the desert. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, this acceptance and receptivity for the mourners is magical.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. And also, the key part is to be aware that the world does not work the way we think it does. And that's something we have to remind ourselves, because when we experience and encounter and perceive that which does not fit into our worldview, what do? We translate it into the worldview to make it fit. Right? And then it becomes an ordinary thing. We're going to see Don Juan actually very specifically comment on this, right? And we have to be very careful of doing that. And this is where honesty, capital H, honesty, becomes so massively, massively valuable, that we do not do this, that we can perceive those moneses. Yes, very helpful, very, very helpful, very, very helpful. All right, just saying hello to all the TikTokers, and let's continue with our story. Yeah,
Yes.
very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. Rasta, this makes a lot of extra work to do, by the way. Where did my... Yeah. Don't think you realize quite how much, but all right. It's not easy to, with a screen share, it takes a couple of tries and a couple of, clicks and that. So it's not just quick to go in and out, and I had to move the chat and do all sorts of stuff. All right, and let me actually, while I'm thinking about chat, let me see if anybody's joined us on chatting in. Oh gosh, everything is working weird now. Come on now. Huh. I got logged out of Restream. That's very weird.
Wow.
Very weird. Yeah, I don't know why. Right. I just want to log back in so that we can all our lives. Restream. Uh, it. It's what shares it to YouTube and Instagram and Facebook all at the same time. Share Zoom, right? Via that. So I can go on Zoom with Beena, and then we can share in one place, all to go live all at the same time. But yeah, I don't know what happened there, why it logged us out now all of a sudden. It's a bit strange. Very odd. All right. Anyhow, we're back. And yeah, okay, it's still streaming. So even though it logged out, we're still streaming. Very odd. Let's see. Why must you think that, it says Don Juan, why must you think, to Carlos, why must you think that every person in a moving crowd is a human being? He asked with an air of utmost seriousness. I really could not explain why, except that I was habituated to believe that as an act of sheer faith on my part. I was talking about hierarchy of motivations. We have to be very careful. We tend to put our personal beliefs at the top. And this can be very dangerous. We have to put things like integrity and ethics and honesty. Those need to be our primary motivations, learning and growing. And then everything that comes is filtered in already according to the important stuff, not the other way around. Anyway, so otherwise you can get this where you just belief takes primacy for no other reason, just because you've said so. And no real logic to it. He went on to say how much he liked to watch busy places with a lot of people, and how he would sometimes perceive a crowd of people who looked like eggs, and among the mass of egg-like creatures, he would spot one who looked just like a regular person. It's very enjoyable to do that, he said, laughing. Or at least it's enjoyable for me. I like to sit in parks and bus depots and watch. Sometimes I can spot an ally right away. At other times, I can perceive only real people. Once I saw two allies sitting in a bus, side by side. That's the only time in my life I have seen two together. Did it have a special significance for you to see two of them? Certainly. Anything they do is significant. From their actions, a brujo can sometimes draw his power. Even if a brujo does not have an ally of their own, as long as they know how to perceive, they can handle power by watching the acts of the allies. My benefactor taught me to do just that. And for years before I had my own ally, I watched for allies among crowds of people, and every time I perceived one, it taught me something. Wow. You found three together. What a magnificent lesson you wasted. Shame, poor Carlos. Yeah, he has to live with this, understanding this knowledge that he had this magnificent lesson, and it was wasted. So, yeah. Anyway, what can you do, Carlos? He did not say anything until we finished assembling the rabbit trap. Then he turned to me and said suddenly, as if he had just remembered it, that another important thing about the allies was that if one found two of them, they were always two of the same kind. The two allies he had perceived were two men, he said. And since I had seen two men and one woman, he concluded, that my experience was even more unusual. Poor Carlos. Shame. I feel for you, Carlos. I feel for you. I asked if the allies portrayed children, if the children could be the same or of the different sex, if the allies portrayed people of different races, if they could portray a family composed of a man, a woman, and a child. And finally, I asked him if he had ever seen an ally driving a car or a bus. Very interesting. I love this 2-year-oldness of Carlos, right? Asking this kind of questions. Yes, it's good. Right? Or at least I think so. At least it gives us some more information that we would otherwise not have had. Right? It's a very peculiar quality of Carlos that he does this. He's persistent in this, right? He doesn't give up on it. Don Juan did not answer at all. He smiled and let me do the talking. When he heard my last question, he burst out laughing and said that I was being careless with my questions, that it would have been more appropriate to ask if he had ever perceived an ally driving a motor vehicle. Yeah. You don't want to forget the motorcycles, do you? He said with a mischievous glint in his eye. I thought he was making fun of my question. I thought he was making fun of my question, was funny and light-hearted, and I laughed with him. Then he explained that the allies could not take the lead or act upon anything directly. They could, however, act upon a person in an indirect way. Don Juan said that coming in contact with an ally was dangerous because the ally was capable of bringing out the worst in a person. The apprenticeship was long and arduous, he said, because one had to reduce to a minimum all that was unnecessary in one's life in order to withstand the impact of such an encounter. Don Juan said that his benefactor, when he first came into contact with an ally, was driven to burn himself and was scarred as if a mountain lion had mauled him. In his own case, he said, an ally pushed him into a pile of burning wood, and he burned himself a little on the knee and shoulder blade, but the scars disappeared in time when he became one with the ally. You know, I feel this part of how things work. When we understand the intent of the universe, which is the intent to awareness, the intent to moreness, and to intent to goodness also, whenever you encounter some power of some kind, there's usually some block to it, some obstacle, some hardship, so that those that don't have the fortitude, the integrity, and the good character don't easily acquire these powers, because then you'd have havoc. Yes, it makes sense. Right? So just a little side note there, and we go on to the next section here, part 3 or chapter 3, I guess. On June 10, 1968, I started on a long journey with Don Juan to participate in a mitote. I had been waiting for this opportunity for months, yet I was not really sure I wanted to go. I thought my hesitation was due to my fear that at a peyote meeting, I would have to ingest peyote, and I had no intention whatsoever of doing that. I had repeatedly expressed those feelings to Don Juan. He laughed patiently at first, but finally, he firmly stated that he did not want to hear one more thing about my fear. As far as I was concerned, a mitote was ideal ground for me to verify the schemata I'd constructed. So remember this schemata, right, of Carlos's, this ideas, right? Well, he'll mention it here now. It's so funny. He goes back to this, right? For one thing, I had never completely abandoned the idea that a covert leader was necessary at such a meeting in order to ensure agreement among the participants. Somehow I had the feeling that Don Juan had discarded my idea for reasons of his own, since he deemed it more efficacious to explain everything that took place at the mitote in terms of perceiving. I thought my interest in finding a suitable explanation in my own terms was not in accordance with what he himself wanted me to do. Therefore, he had to discard my rationale, as he was accustomed to doing with whatever did not conform to his system. Right before we started on the journey, Don Juan eased my apprehension of having to ingest peyote by telling me that I was attending the meeting only to watch. Very interesting how Don Juan he taps into Carlos's intent, yes? And Carlos has no idea of what's coming, but you can probably guess what's coming, right, Beena? Yeah. Yeah. Or not. Anyway, it's fun to speculate. Yeah, fun to speculate. I felt elated. At that time, I was almost certain I was going to discover the covert procedure by which the participants arrived at an agreement. Yeah, Carlos's worldview via superiority paradigm, right? Things can't happen. Moreness things can't happen. It's all manipulation and BS, etc. It was late afternoon when we left. The sun was almost on the horizon. I felt it on my neck, and I wished I had a Venetian blind in the rear window of my car. From the top of the hill, I could see down into a huge valley. The road was like a black ribbon laid flat on the ground, up and down innumerable hills. I followed it with my eyes for a moment before we began descending. It ran due south until it disappeared over a range of low mountains in the distance. Don Juan sat quietly, looking straight ahead. We had not said a word for a long time. It was uncomfortably warm inside the car. I opened all the windows, but that did not help because it was an extremely hot day. I felt very annoyed and restless. I began to complain about the heat. Don Juan frowned and looked at me quizzically. It's hot all over Mexico this time of year, he said. There is nothing one can do about it. I did not look at him, but I knew he was gazing at me. The car picked up speed going down the slope. I vaguely saw a highway sound, Vado, dip. When I actually saw the dip, I was going quite fast. And though I did slow down, we still felt the impact and bobbed up and down on the seats. I reduced the speed considerably. We were going through an area where livestock grazed freely on the sides of the road, an area where the carcass of a horse or a cow or run down by a car was a common sight. At a certain point, I had to stop completely and let some horses cross the highway. I was getting more restless and annoyed. I told Don Juan that it was the heat. I said that I had always disliked the heat since my childhood, because every summer I used to feel suffocated and I could hardly breathe. You are not a child now. The heat still suffocates me. Well, hunger used to suffocate me when I was a child. To be very hungry was the only thing I knew as a child. And I used to swell up until I could not breathe either. But that was when I was a child. I cannot suffocate now. Neither can I swell up like a toad when I'm hungry. I didn't know what to say. I felt I was getting myself into an untenable position, and soon I would have to defend a point I didn't really care to defend. The heat was not that bad. What disturbed me was the prospect of driving over 1,000 miles to our destination. Wow, that's a long drive. Wow. I felt annoyed at the thought of having to exert myself. Let's stop and get something to eat, I said. Maybe it won't be so hot once the sun goes down. Don Juan looked at me, smiling, and said that there were not any clean towns for a long stretch, and that he had understood my policy was not to eat from the stands on the roadside. Don't you fear diarrhea anymore? He asked. I love this. I love this, right? I knew he was being sarcastic, yet he kept an inquisitive and at the same time serious look on his face. Right? I mean, this is the stereotype fear of Americans traveling abroad, right? Don't drink the water, don't drink the water. Anyway, yeah. The way you act, he said, one would think the diarrhea is lurking out there, waiting for you to step out of the car to jump you. You're in a terrible fix. If you escape the heat, diarrhea will eventually get you. And Juan's tone was so serious that I began to laugh. Then we drove in silence for a long time. When we arrived at the highway stop for trucks called Los Vidrios, Glass, it was already quite dark. Don Juan shouted from the car. What do you have to eat today? Pork meat, a woman shouted back from inside. I hope for your sake that the pig was not run down on the road today, Don Juan said to me, laughing. We got out of the car. The road was flanked on both sides by ranges of low mountains that seemed to be the solidified lava of some gigantic volcanic eruption. In the darkness, the black jagged peaks were silhouetted against the sky like huge menacing walls of glass slivers. I love the story that's coming here now. Very, very powerful, right? And also about assumptions, yes? Don Juan said in a convincing tone, that place was called Los Vidrios because a truck loaded with glass had overturned on that spot, and the glass shreds were lying around on the road for years. I felt he was being facetious, and I asked him to tell me if that was the real reason. Why don't you ask someone here, he said. I asked a man who was sitting at the table next to ours. He said apologetically that he didn't know. I went into the kitchen. Wow, very bold, just to go into a kitchen of a restaurant, right? I would see that as very rude just to do that. I would never be able to do that. I mean, I could if I had to, but I wouldn't just do it without asking permission. Anyway, I went into the kitchen and asked the woman there if they knew, but they all said they didn't, that the place was just called Glass. I believe I'm right, Don Juan said in a low voice. Mexicans are not given to noticing things about them. I'm sure they can't see the glass mountains, but they surely can leave a pile of glass there's lying around. But surely can't leave. But surely can leave a mountain of glass shreds lying around for years. Wow. We both found the image funny and laughed. When we had finished eating, Don Juan asked how I felt. I told him fine, but I really felt somewhat queasy. Don Juan gave me a steadfast look and seemed to detect my feeling of discomfort. Once you decided to come to Mexico, you should have put all your petty fears away, he said very sternly. Right? This is very important here, this point, very key. Once you decided to come to Mexico, you should have put all your petty fears away. Your decision to come should have vanquished them. You came because you wanted to come. That's the warrior's way. Now, this is the first time I shares about the warrior's way. Don Juan has said it many, many times before. We're in 1968. And he said it to him over the years since 1960 already. He's been talking about it. In the next book, Journey to Ixtlan, Carlos is going to go back over and pull all of this out again and emphasize the warrior's way, right? But this is very important because he's talking about assuming responsibility. You have to assume responsibility for your decisions, right? Very key. I believe I do that, Don Juan, at least some of the time. It's very hard to keep on reminding myself, though. A warrior thinks of his death when things become unclear. Yeah. That's even harder, Don Juan. For most people, death is very vague and remote. We never think of it. Why not? Why should we? Very simple. Because the idea of death is the only thing that tempers our spirit. Yeah? Very, very, very powerful sharing here by Don Juan. Yeah? This is why we capital R read, so that we can notice these things and not just take it as part of the story and move on, right? And we can stop and take this in, absorb this, right? And this is a very, very, very big point here. Yeah, this point about assuming responsibility for your decisions. This is what impeccability is, and why the root of Moreness-Culture is in the program Way of Impeccability, which is our life change program. It's not a belief system, it's a toolbox. And this is the kind of tool that's in there, the tool of accepting responsibility. As part of the program, I ask participants, I say, do you know right now, sitting here, right? And while we are this moment in time, right now, I'll ask all of you that are on Zoom, on Instagram, on YouTube, wherever you are, Facebook, right? I'll ask you, do you know right now, this moment in time, do you know that weird things, unfair things, unjust things, unpleasant things, awkward things, maybe even horrid things, do you know that they could happen in the future? Yeah? Do you know that there's a possibility? Do you know there's a possibility that things that you don't necessarily want might happen in the future? Yes, people say. Well, now that you mention it, well, kind of duh. Everybody knows this, right? You're aware that stuff can happen. Could, might. Not necessarily will, but could or might. All right. Then I ask, okay, now I'm asking all of you also, knowing that weird and unpleasant and unfair and things that you don't want can happen in the future, knowing this right now in this moment, knowing that stuff that you don't want can happen, do you choose right now to remain alive, knowing what can come, what could come? Do you? Do you choose to remain alive, knowing that stuff that you don't want might happen? Yeah. Anyone? Well, usually the participants, because they very serious, earnest bunch, and they want to live fully and utmost. They say, yes, I choose to remain alive, even if they don't have that. Everybody I've always known, they say, yeah, I choose to remain alive, knowing that stuff I don't want, unpleasant, unfair, awkward, uncomfortable, whatever stuff can happen. Yeah. Now I say, do you realize what just happened? Right in that moment where you said, yes, I choose to remain alive, that choice means you can't complain when stuff happens in the future that you don't want. You chose to remain alive. You've taken responsibility, in other words, through that choice. And when stuff doesn't happen, you don't have to stay alive. You don't have to remain alive. You could choose not to. It's your choice. So don't complain when things happen. You chose. You chose knowing stuff could happen. It's transformative when we take that seriously and take it fully. You accept full responsibility for your decisions. This is what Don Juan is talking about. I'm taking it further. This is what Moreness is all about. Going further, getting into the Moreness of it, right? And this is a very big point here. So accept responsibility for your decisions. But here's the key point. Make your decisions impeccably, which means being thorough, being scrupulous, being diligent, being disciplined, being conscientious, yes? Going above and beyond when it comes to doing your research, your homework. So when you make a decision, and you make a decision in full awareness, yeah, and if you go all the way and you're making a decision based on attunement, you've got no doubts and no possibility of regret. Whatever happens, you chose. Yeah, Carlos, you chose to be there. Carlos, stop complaining. It's your choice. Yeah, very, very powerful. And now we end up living deliberately. See? That's why Way-of-Impeccability is a toolbox for deliberate living. When you live deliberately, you live empowered. It's nothing like living deliberately. Yeah? Very, very big point that I'm mentioning here. Huge, huge, huge point. Yeah. And so Don Juan says, when things become unclear, think of your death. Yes. Or think of Moreness. Think of the wonderful vastness, the brilliance, the awesome of the universe. And the value, right, that you get out of life. And that you want life because there is Moreness. And then things get clear very quickly. And stop involved with petty nonsense. Petty nonsense is a bubble, right? Death pops the bubble. Because you go ask death about, hey, what should I do here? And they say, hey, stop complaining, you got me to take care of. And this stuff means nothing compared to me. By the time we left Los Vidros, it was so dark that the jagged silhouette of the mountains had emerged into the darkness of the sky. We drove in silence for more than an hour. I felt tired. It was as though I didn't want to talk because there was nothing to talk about. Traffic was minimal. Few cars passed by from the opposite direction. It seemed as if we were the only people going south on the highway. I thought that was strange, and I kept on looking in my rearview mirror to see if there were other cars coming from behind, but there were none. After a while, I stopped looking for cars and began to dwell again on the prospect of our trip. Then I noticed that my headlights seemed extremely bright in contrast with the darkness all around, and I looked again in the rearview mirror. I saw a bright glare first, and then 2 points of light that seemed to have emerged from the ground. They were the headlights of a car on a hilltop in the distance behind that. They remained visible for a while. Then they disappeared into the darkness, as if they had been scooped away. After a moment, they appeared on another hilltop, and then they disappeared again. I followed their appearances and disappearances in the mirror for a long time. At one point, it occurred to me that the car was gaining on us. It was definitely closing in. The lights were bigger and brighter. I deliberately stepped on the gas pedal. I had the sensation of uneasiness. Don Juan seemed to notice my concern, or perhaps he was only noticing that I was speeding up. He looked at me first, then he turned around and looked at the distant headlights. I asked him if there was something wrong with me. I told him that I had not seen any cars behind us for hours, and that suddenly I had noticed the lights of a car that seemed to be gaining on us all the time. He chuckled and asked me if I really thought it was a car. Wow. Wow. I told him that it had to be a car, and he said that my concern revealed to him that, somehow, I must have felt that whatever behind us was something more than a mere car. Very important when we unhook from insisting that the world works the way we know it was, This is Moreness culture. We are open to Moreness. Carlos is close to it here. Can't see it, can't perceive it. I felt that whatever was behind me was something more than a mere car. I insisted that I thought it was just another car on the highway, or perhaps a truck. What else can it be? I said loudly. Don Juan's probing had put me on edge. He turned and looked straight at me. Then he nodded slowly, as if measuring what he was going to say. Those are the lights of the head of death. Death pulls them on like a hat and then shoots off on a gallop. Those are the lights of death on the gallop gaining on us, getting closer and closer. A chill ran up my back. After a while, I looked in the rearview mirror again, but the lights were not there anymore. I told the car that Don Juan that the car must have stopped or turned off the road. He did not look back. He just stretched his arms and yawned. No, death never stops. Sometimes it turns off its lights, that's all. Very powerful, you know. In other words, it's always there. It's always there. Tell you a story about lights coming up over the hills. When I was in the military, long time ago, conscription, I hitchhiked on pass to go home. I hitchhiked a lot as youth. Anyway, somebody dropped me off in the middle of a large forest area, very remote forest area. They were going up to the forest station, right? To visit their brother, as it was, who was the forester there. So very remote. So yeah, I'm standing in the absolute middle of nowhere. Tall trees on either side of me, very dark, right? Because the moon wasn't up, and well, it's just the stars, but the shadow from the trees. So middle of nowhere, very dark. I'm standing on the side of the road, and they dropped me off. I don't know, probably about 11 o'clock at night. You know, so it was late. But I stood there for hours, so roughly about 2, 3, somewhere around there, middle of the night. Right, I hear a car, and before that time, a couple of cars had gone by, so I was already familiar with the sound. Right, so I hear the sound, and it's the bit of an increase in the engine as it goes up a hill, and I would see lights. Then there was a dip, and where I wouldn't see the lights, and then the car would come and it would be on the flat part where I was, right? So I hear the sound of the car coming, going up the hill, the first big hill, before it then goes over, and then there's a dip and then up. So I hear this come up, but I don't see any lights, right? And then I hear it go down into the dip again, and I'm still not seeing the lights. And, hey, where are the lights? The next thing I know, this car goes past me, rocks me on my feet with the wind coming from it. It was so close, right? And like, wow. Just like that, suddenly out of nowhere, here's this car, and it was so close to me as well. It couldn't have ridden me over, and they didn't have their headlights on. I'm like, wow, that really stuck with me, right? Because it was so close that air moved me, right? And it was I could see briefly in the moment that it came by, even in the dark. It was kind of a sports car-y type car, right? So anyway, for years I just remembered this as an unusual event. Yeah? And in the context, well, death doesn't always have the headlights on, right? So it can be there at any time. It has that significance too. But then one day I was telling the story, and somebody said, oh, they were probably drug runners, and they were using infrared heat sensing goggles. So they could turn off their lights, and the police can't see them. And they were driving with this. It was very new technology at that time. Very, very new, right? I mean, this was in the early 80s. So I thought, wow, that was very interesting. It sort of explained it. But as an anomaly, as a point of power, yes, to understand that it's, hey, you know what, death doesn't always have its lights on. Yeah. So you got to be aware, be attentive. Yeah. And I had that warning. I could have stepped back, but I didn't. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. Yeah. Also, by the way, sleeping on the side of a highway, very, 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 very difficult. Yeah. I mean, I remember one time where I was very tired. I got to sleep. I can't be standing here anymore. A similar situation. Yeah? And there was roadworks. So, and they were making another highway, right? Extending the highway. So there was a big tip gash where they made basically like a foundation, like a big, massive trough, right? Like a trench, at least, a trench that's as wide as a highway right next to the existing old highway, right? Because they were building a double highway. Anyhow, so I'm on the other side of this massive, great big trench. Yes, I had gone across it. And why? Because when I first lay down, the vibration and that was bothering me, and the noise. And then I tried to sleep. But every time a truck would come by, I would wake up. Even though I knew that this truck could not possibly have crossed over that trench, it felt like it was right there, coming right at me. Perception and reality are not always the same. Perception and reality are not always the same. Always stayed with me, right? Perception and reality, not always the same. Very powerful lesson. Very powerful lesson. See, we get lessons all the time. We just don't always know that we get the lessons. Yeah. But when we pay attention and start seeing the lessons, this is what Moreness-Culture is all about. We live in this massively enhanced and enriched world. Incredibly, incredibly powerful and valuable. Yeah. Most potent. All right. On that note, I shall end it for today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody on TikTok for being here. I love that you all come. It's most marvelous, most magical. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. See you all again. And bye-bye, everybody on Instagram. And let's see there. Ayman joined us. Ayman, I'm most happy that you are here. Ayman, if you have any comments, please leave them there. I always like to hear what you think. Ayman is a most magical, wonderful being. Actually, Ayman, Beena and I were talking about you earlier, about your magicness. So very cool that you're here. Very, very cool. I hope you're still here. Maybe you came and you left already, but either way. Either way. So this is too cool. Let me just say there. I just love you very much. You are most wonderful. Most wonderful. All right. On that note, we shall end everything and we'll see you again. We'll see you again. Hopefully tomorrow. I know we skipped a couple days, just life and work and stuff. It couldn't be avoided. We try and come every day. We like to come every day, but of course, like everything in Moreness-Culture, it's all based on appropriateness. Appropriateness is the root conception, right? We come as appropriate. And see, I delayed a little extra and perfect timing. Perfect timing because Beena comes back, her internet or something must have happened and dropped. And, we get to see Beena now. So
Yes,
brilliant.
and I'm back.
Brilliant. I'm just saying goodbye, Beena. I'm just saying goodbye.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And sorry, because my network on laptop, I don't know, like my phone was working, but my laptop was not connecting to the internet. Anyway, thank you so much, Syl, for sharing, and thank you everyone for joining us. Before we go, I just want to emphasize for my own sake that because every single time when I repeat this, it creates more emphasis on that I have to be very scrupulous about my algorithms. Why I'm saying algorithms? Because it's online and of course offline in my real life algorithm also, because they work exactly in the same way. Because this is how we get inspired by the universal algorithm. Wherever you will pay attention and focus, it will magnify it. Universe will magnify it. Universe will maximize it in your life. So be very, very, very cautious and clear about where you want to focus your attention, because it is going to be more in your life. And not necessarily capital M more, but could be more just random things which you don't want in your life, which can be distraction for you, which can be stress for you, which can be really not so valuable for you. But attention always works, no matter what. So please be very serious about your attention and do attention management also, which is again a super profound concept from Way-of-Impeccability and Moreness project. Attention management, mood management, energy management, they are so amazing. They are the keys, their real philosophy and the real understanding of life, that how things works. Of course, I'm not saying how the world works, but I'm just saying how things works for us and how we can maximize the value we are getting and receiving from the universe in different aspect of our life. So thank you so much for joining us. If you find us in your scrolling thing, in your daily routine, And if you find some value, please do click like and subscribe to this channel. Please also hit the notification bell, because it is going to be more emphasized that this is what you want to have more in your life. And of course, for others also. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Syl, for sharing. Yes.
And Beena, who do you think joined us on IG today?
No idea.
Were we paying attention to earlier?
Yes.
Who are we talking about all morning? Beside you now.
Amy.
Amy joined us, yes.
Yes.
Isn't that incredible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you guys tomorrow.
All right. Bye-bye,
Bye for now.
everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. And